tomorrow. That is the most expensive word in personal finance. Not interest rates, not inflation, not fees hidden in fine print. Tomorrow, starting next month, after the bonus, when things settle down, when I'm earning more, when the kids are older, when the time is right. Every version of financial delay sounds reasonable when you say it out loud. Each one feels like a temporary pause, not a permanent pattern. Each one costs you something you cannot get back. The phenomenon has a name. It has a neurological basis. It has been measured and published in some of the most influential papers in behavioral economics. It is called present bias. Here is what makes it dangerous. Present bias is not a character flaw. It is not laziness. It is not even really a choice in the way we normally think about choices. Present bias is a documented feature of how the human brain processes time, a tendency to overweight what is available right now and underweight what is available in the future, even when you know the future option is better. The bias is not subtle. Research by economists at Harvard and Stanford found that when people choose between $100 in 12 months and $110 in 13 months, most choose to wait. Offer those same people $100 today versus $110 in 1 month, and most take the money now. The objective difference is identical: 1 month's wait, $10 gain. The psychological experience is completely different. Present bias does not apply evenly across time. It applies when now is one of the options. This is what economists call hyperbolic discounting. You discount the future at a much steeper rate when the present is the alternative. The present is not merely preferred. It is treated by the brain as a fundamentally different category from every other point in time. David Laibson, an economist at Harvard, described the implication in a 1997 paper in the Quarterly Journal of Economics. It remains one of the most cited papers in behavioral economics. He showed that present bias creates a recurring internal conflict. The decisions you make today about your future behavior are systematically different from the decisions your future self will make when that moment actually arrives. You plan to save. Your future self spends. You plan to invest. Your future self delays. You plan to start next month. Your future self says next month. Laibson called these hyperbolic consumers, but a more accurate description might be everyone. The research shows that present bias is not a fringe problem affecting a small group of financially undisciplined people. It is the default operating mode of the human brain. The question is not whether you have present bias. The question is how much it is costing you. A research team led by Goda, Manchester, and Sojourner calculated that if you could eliminate present bias from the average person's financial decision-making without changing their income, their knowledge, or their circumstances, retirement savings would rise by approximately 12%. 12%, not from a raise. Not from a better investment return. From the same income, the same life, the same financial knowledge, but without the tendency to treat the present as more real than the future. The implication goes further than most personal finance content admits. Financial education programs, budgeting tools, and channels like this one operate on an implicit assumption that if you understand enough, you will do the right thing. The present bias research suggests that understanding is not the binding constraint. The architecture of the decision is. And nobody understood that better than a behavioral economist at the University of Chicago named Richard Thaler. In the late 1990s, Thaler and his colleague Shlomo Benartzi were working with a manufacturing company whose employees were consistently undersaving for retirement. Standard approaches had been tried: financial education, informational materials, individual consultations. Participation in the retirement plan remained low. Thaler's insight was to stop fighting present bias and start using it. Here is what he had observed. Asking employees to increase their retirement contributions today meant asking them to accept an immediate, visible reduction in take-home pay. That reduction is felt now, in this pay period, in this month's budget. The benefit, a larger retirement balance, arrives decades later, in a future that feels abstract and distant. Present bias makes that trade feel terrible, even when the mathematics are overwhelmingly in favor of saving. But what if you asked employees to increase their contributions not now, but in the future? Specifically, to commit today to directing a portion of their next pay raise toward retirement. The sacrifice would still happen, but it would be extracted from salary they had not yet received. The present moment would feel unchanged. There would be no visible reduction in what they currently had. Thaler and Benazzi called the program Save More Tomorrow. The results were extraordinary. 78% of employees offered the plan joined. 80% of those who enrolled remained through 4 consecutive pay raises. And average savings rates among participants rose from 3.5% of salary to 13.6% in approximately 40 months. They did not receive a raise. They did not complete a financial literacy course. They got a decision architecture that worked with their psychology rather than against it. This is what present bias actually tells you about financial behavior. The problem is rarely that people do not want to save. It is that saving today requires giving something up today. And today is the one time period the brain treats as categorically different from all others. There is a reason for this that runs deeper than psychology. The neuroscience is explicit. In 2004, a team including Laibson and neuroscientist Jonathan Cohen published a study in Science that reshaped how we understand financial decision-making at a biological level. Using brain imaging, they showed that when subjects faced choices involving an immediate reward, a specific set of brain regions became active. These areas are associated with the limbic system, the circuitry that handles emotional and instinctual responses. When the same subjects faced choices between 2 future rewards, neither of which was available right now, those limbic regions stayed quiet. Instead, regions associated with deliberate planning and self-control engaged, the lateral prefrontal cortex and parietal areas. 2 separate neural systems. One for now, one for later. The preference for the present is not a failure of willpower. It is the outcome of a competition between 2 neurological systems, where the one tied to immediate reward activates faster, louder, and with more urgency than the one doing long-term calculation. The prefrontal cortex is not losing the argument. It is losing the neurological competition. And there is a second mechanism compounding the first. In 2011, a researcher named Hal Hirschfield placed subjects in a brain scanner and asked them to think about themselves in the present, and then to think about themselves 20 years in the future. When subjects thought about their future selves, the regions that activated were not the same ones that activated when they thought about their present selves. They were the regions that activated when subjects thought about other people. Strangers. The future version of you that will retire, that will need the money you chose not to save, that will live with today's consequences, your brain does not register that person as you. It registers them as someone else entirely. Saving for retirement is not neurologically an act of self-interest. It is an act of generosity toward a stranger. That is not a metaphor. It is what the data shows. It also helps explain a finding that Stephen Meyer and Charles Sprenger published in the American Economic Journal in 2010. Present-biased individuals are significantly more likely to carry credit card debt than their non-present biased counterparts, even after controlling for income, financial literacy, and risk preferences. present bias does not just prevent saving. It actively generates debt. The person who does not save this month, because it can always start next month, is often the same person adding to a credit card balance because the cost is borne by a future self who feels like someone else's problem. Every January, something shifts. Not in circumstances, not in income, not in financial knowledge. Something shifts psychologically, a sense of a clean break, a version of yourself unconstrained by last year's failures. The debt you accumulated feels like it belongs to the old year. The savings you did not build feel like something the new year can still fix. Researchers Hengchen Dai, Catherine Milkman, and Jason Rees documented this in a 2014 paper in Management Science. They called it the fresh start effect. Using search data, gym attendance records, and goal-setting behavior, they showed that temporal landmarks, the start of a new week, a new month, a new year, a birthday, reliably produce spikes in aspirational behavior. People do not start fresh because their circumstances changed. They start fresh because a psychological boundary separates the imperfect past self from the idealized future self. The slate feels clean, and then, within weeks, present bias reasserts itself. The savings transfers don't happen. The financial plan that felt vivid on January 1st becomes abstract by February. The fresh start effect is not a failure of motivation. Motivation was genuinely present. The problem is that motivation, in the absence of structural change, cannot compete with the neurological pull of the immediate. This is the insight that the most effective financial interventions have absorbed. Not inspire people to want to save, but design the environment so that the brain's bias toward the present works for you rather than against you. The Save More Tomorrow program did not inspire anyone. It restructured the timing of the commitment so that sacrifice felt future rather than present, turning the same asymmetry that normally works against saving into a mechanism for accumulation. In the Philippines, researchers Nava Ashraf, Dean Carlin, and Wesley Yin offered bank clients a new savings product, one that restricted withdrawals until a self-chosen target date or balance was reached. Clients voluntarily chose to lock their own money away, to limit their own future access to their own funds. 28% of those offered the product signed up. And over the following 12 months, their savings balances increased by approximately 81 percentage points relative to a control group. They did not save more because they found stronger willpower. They saved more because the product made it structurally impossible for present bias to reach what future intention had accumulated. This is Laibson's counterintuitive finding made concrete. For a present biased mind, financial flexibility is not always an advantage. The ability to access your savings at any moment is not a feature. It is a vulnerability. This connects to what we have been building across this series. The money scripts that run beneath your financial decisions are the inherited beliefs about what money means and whether abundance can be trusted. The marshmallow test revealed that waiting is only rational when your environment gives you reason to believe the second marshmallow will actually arrive. And now present bias, the neurological mechanism that ensures the default in the absence of structure is always the present moment. The brain that struggles to save is not a broken brain. It is a brain doing exactly what it was built to do: prioritize the certain, the immediate, and the visible over the uncertain, the distant and the abstract. The implication is uncomfortable. It means that motivation, the feeling of wanting to do better, the clarity of January 1st, the urgency you feel reading about how much earlier you should have started, is not enough. It fades reliably against a neural system that was shaped over hundreds of thousands of years to prefer what is available now. The people who save are not people who feel less pulled toward the present. They are people whose financial environments have been designed so that present bias cannot reach the money. Automation, commitment devices, structures that extract the decision from the moment and anchor it in an earlier, calmer version of yourself. The fresh start effect fails when all it produces is a new intention. It works when you use that window of motivation to build a structure that does not require motivation to sustain. What structure did you build the last time you felt like this?